Welcome, everyone. My name is Justin Paperny with White Collar Advice. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce my friend Jennifer Shaw, who, as many of you know, is getting ready to surrender to federal prison for 6.5 years. Before I do, if you're new to our channel, welcome. Quickly, I run White Collar Advice, which is a crisis management firm that helps defendants prepare for sentencing, prison, and oftentimes the hardest part, coming home from federal prison. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the video. Before I do, Jennifer, welcome. I know you're getting ready to surrender to federal prison. How are you feeling at this moment?
Gosh, there's so many emotions that I'm feeling right at this moment in getting ready to surrender. Um, Emotional. Um, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous and scared because to be away from my family. That's um, what I'm most, what I fear the most is, that transition of, not being able to hug and kiss my boys and my husband every day and my mom and uh, but at the same time all of those emotions I also feel hopeful and motivated to do a good job and make the most of my time away.
A number of people who surrender to federal prison, I know from experience, feel a sense of relief because at least the day that you surrender, you finally get credit for time served. So we're going to go back to the beginning of the journey, but is there a sense of relief that at least finally when I surrender in just a few hours, I'm finally getting some credit here?
Yeah, there is, like, there's so many emotions, and I have all of these, like, you know nervous, scared, and then like hopeful, and there is a sense of relief because throughout this entire journey um there was so much ambiguity going through it, and there was so much unknown. And now for the first time, like, I'm in a position where I know what is happening tomorrow. I know what's happening. I know where I'm going to be tomorrow. I know what um I know what my plan is going forward. And so there's a sense of relief that I'm going to be able to put the past behind me and finally start truly healing and forging a new path.
Well, to create this path moving forward, I want to look back a little bit and reflect on some of the choices that have been made. The lion's share of people who become immersed in a government investigation never would have imagined in a million years they would become immersed in a criminal investigation. I was no different. When I learned that I was a target, I responded poorly. I didn't work well with my lawyers. I lied to the government. I did everything terribly. And yet I learned while in prison, and now in this business, I'm not alone. So let's take us back to the beginning for a moment. When you learned that you were a target, what was your immediate response to this investigation?
My immediate response was, they must have the wrong person. Like, they must have this all wrong. I didn't do anything. That was my immediate response. um I was in complete denial at that time and for a long time throughout the process, because I truly believed and was telling myself that I'm not guilty of these things that they're accusing me of. And I that was my initial, that's what I thought when, to answer your question, when the investigation and the arrest first started. That's how I felt.
And in working with your lawyers, do you feel from the beginning you were speaking openly and honestly with them? Or do you feel you couldn't yet comprehend what was transpiring? So you were not even in a position to convey to your lawyers what you knew when it happened and whatnot. Help us understand how well you work with your lawyers as soon as you learned that you were a target or had been arrested.
So that's a great question, because at the time when I thought I was working very openly with my lawyers and conveying all of the facts as I recalled them, and what my involvement was. But then, when I fast forward, I was really, I was, it was like I was in this tunnel. right? And I was only seeing what I wanted to see and what I wanted to recall and what I thought, because again, my perception was I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I was in denial. And so it wasn't until, you know, much, much later, you know, a year later, where finally I had, you know, as you get more information and you look at things, I had difficult conversations with my attorney because I realized I had to take some responsibility. I realized that, you know what, I made a mistake, and my mistakes hurt people. My mistakes, you know, created victims out of, you know, people were hurt from this. My role in this, as a result of that, you know, hurt a lot of people, and that was really hard for me to finally, you know, accept. And one thing, you know, I was basically, I was lying to myself. I was lying to myself because I didn't want to accept that I had done these things, or that I had hurt anybody or created victims, or, you know, or my actions caused harm to people. I did not want to accept that at all. And I was lying to myself and telling myself what I wanted to hear, because like you mentioned, you never expect that you're going to be in this position, that you are going to be somebody that, you know, is involved in a government investigation and facing prison. And the reality of going to prison, I didn't want that to be a reality. That wasn't supposed to be my reality. And that thinking fostered more bad decisions for me throughout the legal process.
That's right. It's ironic when you're immersed in a government investigation, you want the shortest sentence possible. You want to avoid it. Then many defendants who are new, like us, we end up making decisions that simply exacerbate our problems, and we end up getting what we don't want, which could be a longer prison term. I address it because while we work together and we're friends, I'm not a fawning sycophant. I want to hold you accountable, and we're going to talk about that in the video. What are you planning to do in prison? Are you going to document it? Are you going to talk about it? But I've done some podcasts about your case before we began working together. And I did it on my friend Zach's channel. And he and others are like, I love Jen. She's great. She's the best part of the show. I love her. She's awesome. I just wish. Why did she take so long to accept responsibility? It could have been done earlier in the process. And you just touched on it. I want you to touch on it one more. I understand it because it took me 3.5 years to accept responsibility. I'm not alone. I'm not an anomaly. But people who are outside of this system may think you took a long time. I would argue it's not as long as it is for a lot of people. But help us understand one more time why you went from I'm innocent, free me, to I made bad decisions. Walk us through that process one more time.
Yeah, when at the time of the arrest, that's when I first found out about the investigation. When the arrest happened, I was absolutely in denial that any of these accusations were real, because I'm like, I'm not a bad person. No, I've helped so many people. I'm a good person. I would never do these things. And I truly, you know, I believed that. I really believed that. And you don't have all the information, right, at the beginning of an investigation. You don't know all the details or how they arrived at those charges just yet. As I went through the process, and also working with my attorneys, my attorneys can represent me to the best of what I am communicating to them. I'm communicating to my attorneys, I did not do this. Here's all the things I did. Here's all the processes and policies in place, and justifying why I felt like I was innocent. And so my attorneys also believe that and fought hard until, you know, we get farther down the road. A year later, you know, we're going through the process, and it wasn't until right before trial where I'm looking at evidence that is now coming over and meeting with my attorneys, and they're like, wait a minute. And I'm questioning it, going, hold on a second. I don't remember this. I don't remember this specifics. And the biggest thing for me was seeing an actual list of victim names.
Mhm.
That was the first time I had seen that it became a reality for me at that point, that there were actually people hurt from this. Because prior to that, I had never seen that. I knew that I had never actually, I kept thinking, well, I've never talked to a victim myself. So I'm thinking, no, I couldn't have done any of these things. And not until I saw the actual victim list and realized, you know what, my actions and my decisions, I made bad decisions. I used poor judgment. And as a result of that, as a direct result of that, there were people hurt, people that lost money. And that was when I had to make the hardest decision of my life, where despite what I had been saying, because I was adamant that I was innocent, despite saying that, I had to sit there and say, you know what? I have to do the right thing now. As hard as this is going to be for me to stand up in front of my family, my supporters, the victims, to stand up in front of everyone and say, you know what? I need to do the right thing. I'm sorry. And I did this. I made bad decisions, and I need to own up to this, and I need to plead guilty. That was the hardest decision. And, so when people say, well, why did it take you so long? It's really, it is really a journey and a process, because it's not like I was starting out with like, oh, I'm intentionally lying about it. I believed the lie I was telling myself. I truly believed it. And, so not only was I lying to other people, the biggest lie was what I was telling myself, because of the lie I was telling myself. And until I could come out from under that lie and see it, I couldn't change anything else. And I was never going to hold myself accountable or admit guilt. And for me, it was really when I saw that there were actual victims that were, as a consequence of my bad decisions, that there were actually people hurt. And that's when that hurt me, because I wouldn't want, someone in my family to be hurt. And I would expect the person that did that I would expect that there would be consequences.
There are consequences, and I appreciate you articulating. For those of you watching, our company, we do training with law enforcement and lawyers. And when we work with defendants, we try to help them understand how they got here. Only when they understand and self-examine, understanding the motivations behind their choices, the choices themselves, can you articulate to a lawyer. What Jen just broke down is this very cliched accounting term that frankly puts a lot of people to sleep, called the fraud triangle. She faced pressure. She may rationalize those pressures and sees an opportunity. A rationalization in Jen's case was, I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't see it. That is a common rationalization, but it doesn't change the result that people might have been hurt. And there's this old proverb, the best day to plant an oak tree is 20 years ago. The second best day is today. And we're glad you accepted responsibility. We're glad that you were identifying with victims and you were laying out a clear plan to make them whole. And I want to transition to that in a moment. What are you going to do in prison? How are people going to hold you accountable? Are you going to talk about it, or are you going to do it? How are you going to prove worthy of the love and support of your family and your fans who are standing alongside you? Do you even have interest in dealing with the skeptics and the haters and the doubters who have counted you out? So I want to transition to that in a moment. Before I do, if someone's watching this and they just got arrested or they got a target letter from the federal government and they're up all night sleeping, they can't sleep, they're depressed, they're overeating, they're drinking, they're doing drugs, they don't know how to respond, what advice would you give to someone who is now seeing their name versus the United States of America?
Oh, the advice I would give that person is to really, really truly look at the situation, look at yourself, your actions. Don't try to, justify anything. Like, I know it's so hard because you don't, in that situation, you're like, you can't see everything at that time. But I would tell someone in that situation to really, you have to really take some accountability, because there's a reason. Like, how did the government even get to this place. They got here apparently somehow. So as hard as it is, and as humbling as it is, because you really have to humble yourself and look at yourself to say, okay, where where did I possibly go wrong?
Mhm.
And I'm saying this because you can save yourself and your family and your loved ones a lot of heartache and um, you know just stress, anxiety. I mean, the entire process is very painful, but you can try to mitigate some of that the sooner you can accept responsibility.
That's right. To those of you who are immersed in a government investigation, I already know you feel like you're in prison 24 hours a day. So if you're going to be or feel like you're in prison, you might as well make measurable progress to try to get the best outcome possible. And if you broke the law, you got to learn what you did and why and accept responsibility and lay out a plan. Let's talk about the plan as you get ready to surrender to federal prison for 6.5 years in just a handful of hours. Okay, well, initially when you reached out to our team, me and Michael Santos, through White Collar Advice and our nonprofit Prison Professors, we'll talk about that. You said, I want to document my journey through federal prison and try to show why I'm different than the government's version of events. I think you used a great phrase, something we mentioned in our webinars, which is we're hoping the stakeholders will take the totality of our life into consideration rather than bad choices you made over a period of time. So let's talk about the release plan you worked with our team to create and why you thought there was value in creating this plan.
So the release plan, you mentioned I'm getting ready to surrender in a few hours. I'm going in with two things, the Quran and my release plan. So with the release plan, so I'm going into prison with an 18-page release plan that has 11 different sections that is going to help me stay on track, hold me accountable, and it's something that I'm going to build on while I'm in prison. So right now, it's 18 pages. It's going to grow from there because I'm going to, I have deliverables in the release plan. I'm going to be journaling the experience, documenting everything. And this release plan is not only my roadmap, but it's what is going to hold me accountable for, for everything that I am telling, that I told the judge in sentencing that I will make sure that I make these victims whole. This release plan is going to help me be successful so that I can do that, so that I can prove worthy to my family of all of the love and support they've showed me throughout this entire process. My husband Sharif, my sons, and my mom. So this release plan is really, it's going to help me be as productive as possible and make the most of the situation, because I can't change this situation. I am surrendering to prison, but what I can control and what I can change is, and have control over, is what I make of this. And what am I going to do with that? I have already made some bad decisions. I have already hurt people. Now I'm committed to making a change and making this as positive as I possibly can to inspire and help as many people as I can.
Something our team encourages people to do is put yourself in the shoes of the stakeholders, a case manager in prison, a warden, a probation officer, a judge, and they expect people like you and me, convicted criminals who serve time on the wrong side of prison boundaries, to say, we're sorry because we got caught. We gave money back because we want to get a shorter prison sentence. They're used to being told things without very little evidence and follow through. And indeed, I'm sure people may leave a comment. She's saying this because she wants to get out early. She's not truly remorseful. You're never going to get everyone back. The great news is you don't need everyone back. I learned that because my network was obliterated when I went to prison a very long time ago. But there are people who say, I believe her. I trust her. I want her to prove worthy of it. And that's the reason you've got to document it. But it does require hard work, right? It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to do it, because in a matter of hours, you're going to be standing for count in prison, and there will be days you're going to miss your family and thinking, wow, I wish I was home. Some days it's difficult to get out of bed or brush your teeth, but that's the work. It requires you to do it on those days. So for everyone watching who are questioning, will she follow through? Is she saying something and then doing another? This release plan and how she is going to document her journey is going to convince or show all of you is she actually doing it? Or is she saying this on a YouTube video and not following through? So to that end, let's talk about some of the ways you intend to keep your fans, your followers, people who admire you, people who loathe you, and everything in between. Let's talk about some of the ways you plan to disseminate your work. You've mentioned a website. Is it a newsletter? It's the release plan. What are ways that you can keep your network informed of your progress in prison?
Right. So I'm going to be, through the website, I'm going to be documenting and updating, journaling my process. And I want people to hold me accountable. That's why I'm talking about the release plan, because this is what's going to hold me accountable. I plan on publishing, parts of the release plan, if not the whole release plan, sharing it with everyone because on the website, because I'm inviting everybody to hold me accountable. I get it. I know that there are people out there that don't believe what I'm saying right now because they feel like, oh my, you lied for so long. You didn't accept responsibility. I get that. All I can do going forward is show you. I get, me saying this isn't going to convince a lot of people, but what will convince people are my actions and following through. And I want people to hold me accountable.
Well, we are going to hold you accountable. And that's the beauty of doing this, because some people say it, they don't do it. You're saying it. I'm confident you're absolutely going to do it. Let's talk about a day in federal prison. I have no doubt people watching this are curious about what life is like in federal prison. Some people are probably like, it took these people 20 minutes to get what I want to know about, which is what is Jen's life going to be like in federal prison? Have you given thought to what a structure of your day will look like in federal? I know we've covered it, but I want you to articulate what do you hope to do in a 24-hour window in federal prison, Jen? You have a lot of time.
I have thought about that. Obviously, the release plan forces you to kind of go through that process too, and realistically face it and figure out what are you doing with your time? How are you going to spend your time? So, I plan on spending my time waking up early, spending the, early morning time writing, reading. I have built into my release plan the first 12 books on my reading list that I'll be, sharing with everybody, and also doing book reports on. That's holding myself accountable. I'm not just reading it. I'm really trying to read to gain value and apply it. And so reading, exercising, working on the release plan. I also want to, give back and hopefully be able to inspire other women and hopefully be able to teach other women and hopefully create some sort of course or teaching program in the prison to teach this release plan and really try to help other women and give them the knowledge that I was able to gain from working with you and with Michael. And because it's so invaluable, and giving back and trying to help other women put together their release plan and their roadmap for success throughout this process.
For those of you watching, while I run White Collar Advice, my business partner, Michael Santos, who served 26 consecutive years in prison for a nonviolent drug crime, I met him in prison in 2008. We've been business partners ever since. Michael runs the nonprofit Prison Professors. And part of the goal of the nonprofit is to create programs that are implemented in prisons and jails all across the country. And we're using these programs to advocate for change, prison reform that has passed, more reform we hope to have come down the road. But we do create courses for people in prisons and jails all across the country, including a release plan course. And I know, Jen, that was enticing to you since you've invested, 100 hours working on your own release plan. It's documented, you're going to grow it. And you said, without even me suggesting to you, I'd love to teach this release plan course in prison to the hundreds and then thousands of women with whom I will serve time. Is that a goal? And talk a little bit about these aspirations to give back and contribute while in prison.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a goal. I put it in my release plan that I would love to teach, a course in prison to the other women that I'm with on the release plan. And I really feel like having this much knowledge that could help so many. And I feel very blessed that I was able to do the research, find you and Michael, and then reach out and get the help from you too. And, in making this come to a reality, this release plan. And I want other women that are going through this, experience to be able to have that tool and that resource as well.
For everyone watching, it's difficult surrendering to prison, even if you call it a minimum security camp, club fed, a country club, no fences or bars. People see the track and the pickleball and bocce ball. They think you're having the time of your life. Okay. But it's still federal prison. You're separated from family, and it can be a hopeless environment with people who have been in and out of the system their whole life, who admittedly did not have opportunities that I know that I had and took for granted and exploited. I made bad decisions and went to prison. Jen has had opportunities that many women in that prison have not had. So I know through my experience, Jen, I found some perspective, and I wrote about it extensively with Michael in Lessons from Prison, a book any of you can get for free, White Collar Advice. Do not buy the book. But I wrote about perspective. It helped get me through it. Have you yet found perspective, or do you feel like you need to go to federal prison to see what real struggle has looked like for so many women throughout their life? This war on drugs, mandatory minimums that send people to prison for 10 and 20 and 30 years for, in some cases, nonviolent drug crimes. Have you found perspective, or is it too early?
That's a really good question. And I have found perspective. Oh man, going through this, just this entire process, but then also through being able to do work with your nonprofit organization and hearing these other stories, being on these webinars, reading the books and doing the research. I was telling Coach the other day, I said, as painful and terrifying as this experience is, and having to surrender, I said, what I've realized is we are better off than others are. And I know that sounds crazy to say, because right now it feels like we're at the bottom. There couldn't be anything worse. But you know what? I know that there are others that aren't as blessed as I am going into this situation. I know that there are mothers that are going to be surrendering, that have very young children that are going to be taken away from, toddlers. I'm going to miss my boys terribly, of course, but at least they're a little bit older where they can understand what's happening to mommy. I've had the discussions with them that mommy made a mistake, and now mom, these are the consequences. And, we've had those discussions. My heart breaks for, the moms that have to surrender and be away from their little babies. So I have found the, perspective, and, and just so humbled and grateful. And, every day, we start out the day with always saying, end the day with, what are we grateful for today? Because it seems in this situation, there are so many things that you can complain about, but I really have had to change my mindset and perspective in preparing to surrender and for the road ahead of me. I had to, in order to be successful and be productive.
If you don't find some of those benefits, then it's truly a wasted experience. And if you're not creating a release plan and building and growing and sharing what you've learned and why you're worthy of returning to a television career or whatever it is you hope to do, that could impede what I know is so important to you and came up on our first call, repaying the victims. And people are cynical. It took me 9 years to pay back. In my case, I went to the US Treasury, but it took me 9 years to pay the money back. But I told the judge I was going to do it, and I did. And some people say the numbers are so massive and big, it will never happen. Very cynical, underestimating what you're capable of. I know in your release plan, you not only committed to repaying the victims, you've essentially said a good portion of what comes into your books, into your commissary every month, you're going to be applying to what's called a voluntary financial responsibility program to begin this long haul of making payments back to victims. I want you to touch on that for a moment. Again, you're not saying it, you're going to implement it in prison and then upon your release. Let's touch on that for a moment.
Right. A big part of my release plan is, repaying the victims, repaying those that were hurt by my actions and by my decisions. And so I built that into my release plan. How am I going to repay those victims? Well, while I'm in prison, how am I going to do that? So it's written out in there, and it's voluntary, but for me, I want to make it it mandatory for
Yes.
me. For
Yes.
my personal plan, it's not voluntary, it's mandatory, and I've made put an amount in that I'm going to be paying, and I put that in there because once it's in my plan, that's going to hold me accountable. um, and then throughout prison and after, I have in there the plan to continue to pay restitution. What am I going to do when I get upon release? I have things written out in my plan, what I plan to work on, projects that I plan to do, my writings, all of those kinds of things, so that I know and have a plan and people can hold me accountable, and see that this is not just, oh, hey, I'd like to pay the victims back. No, I'm putting thought and effort behind this, and concrete plans to be able to pay them back. And that was important with the most important thing with the release plan.
Something our team encourages Jen or any defendant traversing this system to do is to share that work with everyone. She can share with her probation officer from prison, with her case manager. We have some people in our community who have heard horrific things from the federal judge at their sentencing, who will send the release plan to their judge. Why? Because they are documenting what they are doing, sharing it's not made up. It's not fake. It's not, as Michael used to say to me in federal prison, that's all happy talk. It's work, but it does require hard work and rebuilding and creating a record. So let's wrap up this interview with you have a 6.5-year sentence. You're getting ready to surrender to prison, presuming you avoid all disciplinary infractions in prison, and you will. No iPhones, no vaping, no drugs. Can see crazy things going around you at all times. It's the Wild West inside of some of these minimum security camps. You avoid problems, get good time off, benefit from recent prison reform. You're home. What does life look like on the other side when your family picks you up from that federal prison in the coming years? What does life look like on the other side for Jen?
Wow, that makes me a little emotional when you said that, because that is the ultimate goal for me, to be on the other side, to be able to be back with my family. And what that looks like for me, success for me, is having completed everything laid out in my release plan. Mm-hmm. I'm now out, and then continuing that path that I've laid out, working with, the nonprofit organization, being able to give back through prison professors, white collar, advice, because I think it's valuable. And I would love to give back, what I've learned, and helping other women, inspiring other women, working with the National Tongan American Society in the community, continuing our, civic and health initiatives there, and expanding, the offices. Also working back, getting back to where I'm back into the entertainment industry, and doing it in a way where I am, affecting positive change, and aligning with everything that, the goals that I've laid out.
Well, Jen, I can tell you, I know what it's like to self-surrender to federal prison. My sentence was brief, though not easy, but I had a plan, and I worked that plan every single day with help from a mentor, Michael Santos, and our team is happy to work alongside you as you get ready to traverse a very long journey. But I have no doubt the preparations you've put in place, and you've done the work, and I see the skeptics, and there'll be people who are, you're doing this just to say that. Can't change that, and you'll never get all of them back, and as I've said before, you don't need them. But the value of this interview, when I proposed it to Jen, and she said, I'm happy to do it and contribute. What's the main takeaway? I said, here's the takeaway, Jen. Here it is. People expected you to say, I'm sorry because you got caught. I'm going to repay the victims because I want a shorter prison sentence. They said the same thing about me, right? I understand the cynicism. I've been to prison, but I've been home for a long time, and I know the value of rebuilding and documenting it. And I said, Jen, let's get it on the record. Let's get it on the record, and then you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. With that said, I'd love to give you the last word as you get ready to self-surrender to the federal prison camp.
I want to thank all of my supporters out there that have been there throughout this entire journey, and supported me through the most difficult time of my life. and not only me, but my family. And, I want to say thank you for supporting me, for loving me, for standing by my side, unconditionally, for, and I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for letting you down. I'm sorry for letting the victims down. And, you know, I want to, from this point forward, prove worthy. I want to um, make each victim whole. I want to prove worthy of the love and support that Sharif and Omar and Sharif Jr. and my mom have shown, my brothers and sisters have shown me throughout this journey. Um, I want to let all of you know that I want, I'm not just saying this. I am I want you to hold me accountable. I'm going to be documenting everything throughout this process, throughout this journey, through my release plan. And um, it's not just talk. I'm going to show you through my actions and through hard work. And um, I hope that I can earn back, your trust and belief, and by my actions.
My mentor and partner, Michael Santos, taught me in federal prison, through hard work, not happy talk, we can all become better than bad decisions from our past. We can't talk about it. We have to do it. Prove worthy of a second chance, earn it, and find perspective and focus on what we can and cannot control. And I'm grateful that you're saying these things to all of us. And I, of course, am betting on you to succeed and will be alongside you this whole journey. So on a personal note, thank you for sharing your story and for allowing the whole world to hear your goals and plans, and for you encouraging everyone to hold you accountable throughout this journey. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all of your help to you and Michael.
Of course.